Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this webinar session, and I would like to uh, welcome you all on behalf of NJIT APEX Accelerators, the statewide APEX Accelerators for the state of New Jersey, except Union County. Please take a note about that. And this is Ahmad Sharifi. I'm procurement counselor with the APEX Accelerators here, and I would like to present to you RegDOX Solutions Inc., who is our presenter today. And we will be presenting to you the CMMC, DFARS and FARS compliance and the landscape about it. And I have Napoleon O'Brien, who is the Director of Technology at RegDOX, leading the company's IT and operations. Arti Kurana, who is the Director of Sales at RegDOX, overseeing sales operations across the Americas. And of course, Mr. William O'Brien, our presenter today.
Hello.
Mr. William O'Brien has a strong and successful history of legal, business, and public service. He has both led and advised companies on product launches, fundraising, organization and strategic investments, privacy and security compliance, domestic and international sales. In mergers and acquisitions, Mr. O'Brien has supervised organizations involving hundreds of employees and contributors. Along with his legal and managerial skills, he brings a solid entrepreneurial record. Most recently, he is co-founder and president of RegDOX Solutions, a cloud-based cybersecurity company for securing online content, including CUI. William O'Brien holds advanced degrees in law, including both a Juris Doctorate and a Master of Intellectual Property Law. He has personally designed and launched a cybersecurity service to address the confidentiality and management requirements for CUI. Now, before passing to William to start with his presentation, I would like to take 2 more minutes so I could explain the house rules for you all, and also to have all other attendees to be able to join us. As sometimes it takes some time for everybody else to join. So here are the house rules. Please post your questions in the Q&A box. All the questions will be reviewed and will be answered at the end of the webinar. And if you have any information that you would like to share, you can share it in the chat box. You can share your information there. And of course, your identity is something voluntarily if you'd like to share or not. So you choose whether you want to share your identity or not. And of course, we will respond to all the questions one by one, or we will post a group answer to all of you in case it is related to cybersecurity or the services that we provide at NJIT APEX Accelerators. Each will be specifically addressed in the Q&A box. So thank you very much, William and the team joining us for today's webinar. Please, I would like you to take these on with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. We really welcome all of you who are attending. I appreciate the introduction there. As is fairly evident from the invitation and our title page here, we're going to be presenting a checklist for complying with the Department of Defense Information Security Program, known as the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or as it's most often referred to, CMMC, certainly a lot easier than saying the full title. We're going to follow what I call the 2-to-1 rule. We're going to try to use about 2/3 of your valuable time to go through the presentation, and the last third we'll make available for questions. Now, Ahmed did me the service of going through my background here, so it kind of means I don't have to awkwardly tell you what my background is and what we've done. But we've been at this, it's fair to say, a number of years. For over 10 years, we've been following first NIST publications and the DFARS and ITAR regulations and everything that's, as it's over time, developed into the current October 2024 release of CMMC 2, and we'll get into exactly what that means. But we've been at this for a while, and we think we've been able to pick up some fairly good practices from some of our customers and clients and others in the industry of how to approach and comply with the CMMC. Again, the CMMC is a cybersecurity and assessment program. We've provided some fairly detailed slides here, and the reason for that is not because I'm going to ask you to speed read your way through it or that I'm going to read all of them. We want to make this presentation available to you afterwards, and we want it to be as valuable as possible. So as you go through it, you see a number of references to websites and publications and so forth. Again, if those interest you, just let us know by contacting us at info@regdocs.com, and we'll send you a copy of the presentation. So again, based upon our experience in dealing with clients and talking with some of the regulators and who have been successful and who have struggled with compliance, we've identified what is somewhat of an intuitive, but I think a necessarily disciplined 5-step process for achieving CMMC compliance. And the 5 steps, which we'll go through in detail, each one of them, but the first is becoming knowledgeable in the CMMC. So take the time to get the background. What is required? What are the reference publications? What are the reference standards? How does the approach of becoming compliant and the assessment requirements work into these regulations? So once you become knowledgeable of it, then you lay the foundation. The foundation is basically producing a gap analysis, identifying the gap of where your organization is and where it needs to be in order to be compliant to the degree necessary for you to do business with the Department of Defense or one of its contractors. And then when you've done that, when you've laid the foundation, when you have a gap analysis, the next logical step is to build on that foundation, to implement and complete a plan to close the gaps and get to the fully compliant state at the level of compliance that you identify as necessary for your organization. And you achieve that, you still the job isn't done, because with the CMMC, and as we all know, with cybersecurity in general, the job is never done. It goes on and on. And so what you have to do is, once you are compliant, you have to organize yourselves and your processes to have a continuous program to maintain compliance. And you will find as we go through it that there are specific requirements within the underlying controls in the CMMC of not only maintaining that compliance, but reporting that compliance on an ongoing basis. And as I mentioned, the 5th step is to report your compliance using, again, the first acronym I'll use is SPRS, Supplier Performance Risk System. And we'll go through these acronyms because I think that's part of becoming knowledgeable in the CMMC. So as you become knowledgeable, you're going to want to start off with looking at some fairly basic reference publications. And conveniently enough, the Department of Defense, who wants to expand the defense industrial base, wants you to be successful because they want as many participants, but they do want those participants to be meeting the regulations. They've made publications available to us. I put on this slide the publications we'd recommend that you go to. But the importance of this stage cannot be overstated. You have to make sure you understand the basics, the compliance levels, the security requirements, the regulatory terminology, because having a fundamental understanding of what is required and the goals will set the tone for everything else that falls in your efforts. So we encourage everyone to spend some time with these official sources cited here. They aren't just references, they are your roadmap, and familiarity with the DoD website and with the Cyber AB, the Cyber Accreditation Body website, will be fairly important in allowing you to structure a compliance program and succeed in compliance. I'm going to go through some of the acronyms that I may use today, some I know I will use, and point them out to you. You've probably heard some of these. One I've used, I think now is, I think I use DIB, Defense Industrial Base. Fairly CUI is what we're dealing with here. That's controlled unclassified information. It is basically information that exists between public information and classified, which is the way the DoD government talks about secrets. So it's information that isn't a secret, but it's in that sense, but it is information that the government does not want publicly available. And so the whole approach of the CMMC is to keep that information and handle it in ways that will avoid having it be disclosed when it's not supposed to be. You'll hear us use at times, going up the top of this list, C3PAO, Certified Third Party Assessing Organization. We at times, and you probably do, or you'll come to just rattle off that because it's fairly important if you're dealing with certain forms of CUI. You need to know the acronym DIBCAC, which is Defense Industrial Based Cyber Assessment Center, because there are certain categories of CUI, even when you're at the intermediate level of 2, there's levels 1, 2, and 3, where you're going to have the government do the assessment of your cybersecurity standards and processes and approve them. And DIBCAC is the agency that does that. There's others that I will reference at times. These are 2 publications that you really have to know because they form the basis of CMMC compliance. It's NIST Special Publication 800-171 and NIST Special Publication 800-172. 171 has 110 controls, as we'll discuss. Those are controls you have to meet in order to completely satisfy all level 2 requirements. 800-172 adds to those controls, and you have to satisfy, I have it in my slides later on, but I think it's 24 of those controls in order to be level 3 compliant. You've heard me reference SPRS, Supplier Performance Risk System. This is a way of reporting compliance as well as assessing where you are in moving towards and reaching compliance. Once you build some familiarity with the terminology, it's time to figure out where your organization falls on the CMMC spectrum. There are 3 compliance levels under CMMC level 2. And again, I mentioned level 2, which was introduced in a regulatory release this past October. I put a link there to it. It's being implemented over time, as we'll discuss, but it sets out 3 compliance levels. There's level 1, which is a foundational level, and that is the level when you're doing business with the DoD and you're dealing with just basic federal contract information. And what the CMMC requires is that you comply with 15 of the controls that come from the Federal Acquisition Clause 52-204-21. And I put references to these so you can look them up fairly quickly. Federal contract information is, as you would assume, just fairly basic information. You have a contract, here's the purchase order, that sort of thing. Going on to level 2, which is the level that focuses in on protection of CUI. As I mentioned before, you have to meet 110 controls to be fully compliant with level 2. And there are there's a 3-year cycle of assessments that you have to undergo. There's certain level 2 CUI, where you have to get third-party C3PAO assessments in order to comply. And those are when there's identified in the contract what they refer to as a advanced threat. They will require your compliance to be assessed by a third party. And then level 3 is expert, and it focuses in on COI, where again, there's advanced persistent threats. In order to be level 3 compliant, you have to be perfect under level under 800-171. So in other words, your level 2 compliance has to be perfect, and you have to meet 24 selected controls out of SP Special Publication 800-172, and you have DFARS assessment is required. So understanding or believing where your organization lies in the compliance level is important. And what it requires, once you've chosen a level, you have to say, well, how do I become compliant? And if it's level 1, if it's federal contract information only, there you have to be perfect under the 15 controls. When doing your assessment, you either of those, you have your organization against those controls, you can either have met or not met. Unless you've met them all, then you can't bill yourself as level 1 compliant. But again, the controls are relatively straightforward. Level 2, the scoring of it is within a range of -203 to 110. Now, as you'd expect, 110 shows that you perfectly met each control. The reason that it doesn't go from 0 to 110, because not complying with certain controls earns you a negative score or a reduction in your possible score beyond just 1. There's some, for example, that if you don't meet multi-factor authentication at all, then 5 points would be deducted. And if you're not FIPS, and FIPS, I'm not sure if that's a, just look here, actually, all the acronyms I gave you, that's not one, that's Federal Information Protocols. If FIPS compliance has to be included in your controls, or again, there'll be a -5 if it's missing. So you go through each one of the 110 controls. For those that some of those that you don't meet, you will be penalized. Level 3, as I mentioned before, requires a perfect level 2 score, and then compliance with the level 3, the 24 controls out of level 3. And again, just to revisit the CMMC scoring for compliance, it's 15 controls, met or not met for level 1. Level 2 is you have to eventually get to 110. There can be partial compliance if you meet certain controls are required. Some can be not met, but you have them covered by a plan of action as long as you reach an SPRS score of 88. So the minimum passing score is 88. We'll discuss it later on, but you have to have at that point have met the required ones, and the others that can be put into a plan of action and milestones of home have to be completed within 180 days. So you have, again, we'll cover a conditional and eventually leading to a final compliance. And as I mentioned before, all level 3 is complete compliance of all the NIST 800-171, as well as the identified 172 controls. So the most common target level is going to be level 2. That covers most companies dealing with the Department of Defense or defense contractor. As I mentioned before, you can start to participate in the DIB, or if you have a contract, you can be compliant on that contract as long as you read 88, and the only controls that aren't fully compliant are the allowable ones, which can be covered by another acronym, a plan of action and milestones, a POEM. And that conditional compliance is only good until you finally reach a final passing score or the expiration of 180 days, whichever first occurred. Now, the reason they say the final passing score is once you've reached it, if you fall off it, you're not conditionally approved. So you have to then go through the whole assessment again, or self-assessment again. The results of all levels are posted in the SPRS and can be reviewed by contracting officers or otherwise for required activities. In finally going through, now that we've gone through those steps in laying the foundation, you will produce what is called the system security plan, and you'll perform the gap analysis. I mentioned the gap analysis before. The system security plan is necessary because it describes where you are. It helps you establish what that gap is and where you're going to need to be. You assess NIST 800-171 controls against that plan, and use the same. One of the things you ought to be aware of is another publication, which is NIST publication 800-171. That helps interpret 171. If you're looking at controls, some of them seem somewhat ambiguous or are broadly stated. NIST special publication 800-171A is intended to provide you the assessment objectives for each requirement and helps you interpret whether or not you've met it. And again, as you go through it, you establish whether you're met, not met, or when it comes to level 2, you've only partially met it, because again, reaching back to those partial scores, that may be important. One of the things that you need to do as you're doing your assessment is document your findings. It's fine for either a third-party assessor or you doing a self-assessment to say, okay, we've met this and move on. You have to be prepared to support through documentation your determination as to whether or not the control has been met and how you met it. So you've now gone through understanding what you're supposed to be doing. You've built on that understanding through coming up with a system security plan and a gap analysis, a gap assessment. Now you build on it by remediating the gaps and closing those when you're going to do it in accordance with a detailed plan of action and milestones. And the purpose of the plan is to correct deficiencies and from the government's point of view, diminish or eliminate any system vulnerabilities. This step is both technical and managerial. You're likely going to need to implement some new technologies, update policies, conduct staff training, and as you go through them, you're going to have to look at opportunities for technical solutions as to how you run your operation, how you safeguard CUI, how you monitor the movement of CUI through your organization and ensuring that all the controls are met as it comes into, is used by, and disseminated by your organization. And again, I want to emphasize, because this is fairly important, as the controls are implemented, you have to focus in on the evidence. Sometimes they call it the artifacts, the evidence that you've met the requirements. And you do that through documentation of configuration files, screenshots, attendance logs at trainings, the vulnerability scans, penetration scans, that sort of thing. So you've built it, you've remediated you're remediating the gaps, and again, you're preserving the evidence of compliance. And by the end of this third step, the gaps you've identified in step 2 have been mitigated, and a complete set of security documents and evidence demonstrating full compliance should be available. So that brings you to, you've brought yourself in compliance with the CMMC at the level you need to be for the type of federal information CUI that you're dealing with. Then your obligation is continues. It's only half the battle. The other half is maintaining that compliance. Environments change, new technologies brought in, new systems are brought in, new projects are launched, projects are closed out. You need to conduct periodic internal audits, formal reassessments, as we discussed, of your organization, and this needs to be done on an ongoing, a continual basis. The rules are that at least annually or more frequently for critical controls, you are required to evaluate your adherence to each one of the controls that are applicable to your level of compliance. Again, 110 for CMMC level 2, 134 for CMMC level 3. And this is, as I mentioned, required by one of the controls. And control says you've set up a system to monitor security controls with ongoing log management, intrusion detection, vulnerability scanning, and so forth, and that you're documenting the results of this ongoing monitoring. Now, as I mentioned before, you have to update your documentation regularly, even if you are saying, well, nothing's changed and so forth. You probably need to document that nothing's changed, document through screenshots that your systems remain compliant. You need to, if there's new vulnerabilities that are identified or weaknesses that are developed through the introduction of new controls or changes in the training posture and so forth, you need to update your plan of action and milestones. You need to keep training logs of new hires, fairly important. You need to archive incident reports. It's actually required in log system maintenance activities. So this is an ongoing effort to assess your operation for compliance and document your conclusion. And to the extent there's need to update evidence, you should go ahead and update it. There's also requirements of an annual compliance affirmation. A responsible official within your organization has to file an annual affirmation of compliance. And the CMMC rules require a loss of certification if this isn't done. What they're trying to make sure is that someone senior in your organization is taking responsibility, that these annual or periodic assessments are being done, and that the representations that have been made in the past continue to be accurate going forward. Now, step 5, which you've done after you've remediated gaps, you're at a compliance level, is to report compliance. Now, the self-assessments are reported to the Department of Defense through the SPRS system, and I've provided a log website reference to that system. And that's where you report the initial compliance and the ongoing compliance. You report your SPRS score. So if your SPRS score meets the minimum of 88, you report it, and then you report it when you're closed the home out and you've reached the 110 score of that reflects having met all of the requirements. If you have to attain a third party, a C3PAO certification, the certifying organization will report give you a level 2 CMMC level 2 certification, and will also typically report the results into a website or platform, more precisely a portal, which I haven't mentioned yet, but I think it's really important for you to know. It's the EMAS portal. That's, again, an acronym that stands for Enterprise Mission Assurance Support Service. That's an online platform that is used to both inform the DIV about certain changes to requirements, any ongoing information that is necessary on that level, but also to allow compliance levels and certifications to be reported. It's similarly, if you're looking towards a level 3, a CMMC level 3 compliance, the DIBCAT, the government agency that does the assessment of organizations who are seeking certification at that level, will report their determination into the EMAS. Again, reporting the compliance doesn't end with the filing of scores or attaining a certificate. Once you've done that, under the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, you have to provide access to facilities, system, and personnel. If the Department of Defense determines that an assessment of your implementation, your compliance posture as represented by you or a third party was accurate and or remains in compliance. So that's basically the 5 steps, walking through it. A lot of information I know, and some of it's fairly high level. You can learn a lot more by going into some of the materials we've presented links to. The CMMC future, I think, is evident to all of us. It's going to be increasingly robust controls. The CMMC isn't static, it's evolving. And we know that the DoD will continue to add requirements and expectation, more rules, more controls. The level 2 assessment, the assessments will continue for organizations maintaining CUI under level 2. And over time, I think we're going to find that more often those self-assessments that we described are going to be less frequent, and expert or third-party assessments are going to be required. I think we're going to find that the reassessments are going to tighten up from being every 3 years to more frequently. So this is where we are now, but going forward, it's going to be something that becomes more robust. So the conclusions that we've reached, is probably what you've reached, was that CMMC compliance is challenging. The cybersecurity challenges facing the defense industrial base are real and growing, but they're not insurmountable. The CMMC provides a roadmap, and this 5-step framework is designed to make that roadmap manageable. At RegDOX, we found that often there's solutions out there. We think we provide a solution that allows for companies to address many of the controls through enabling technologies such as ours that are geared towards addressing those controls. But some of them are always going to be up to your organization, training, having the right policies in place, the ongoing assessments. All of that is something that can't be provided by enabling technology. Enabling technology such as ours can, if used correctly, can go a long way in giving you, and therefore the assessors and the Department of Defense, an understanding that compliance is being achieved. But it's up to you to use it. It's up to you to continue the other less technologically addressable requirements. So at the end, I did provide a couple of slides that I wanted to just make available in case folks do want this this presentation. We've provided a review of CMMC levels based on 4 what we think are key dimensions: the number and source of the security requirements, the nature of the assessment, whether POEMs are required, plans of action and milestones are required, and what the ongoing affirmation requirements are. So obviously, we don't go through it right here. It wouldn't make sense, but if you do want it, it's available. And I've also, as a second appendix, provided some really detailed information on the CMMC EMAS portal, what you'll find there and how it can be used and so forth. So those are available. And with that, I'll turn it back over to whoever's going to take the questions.
Hello, thank you. Let me check the questions here.
Thank
All right,
you,
we have
William, for the very insightful and very informative session. Thank you very much. So here we go. You get the questions. Do we have any? Napoleon?
It seems like there are a couple. Just let me check.
Thank you.
I think I saw a question pop up there that it's gone away, but I can address it. The question was, how does this CMMC work with ITAR? So ITAR technical data is controlled under obviously non-Department of Defense regulations. The International Trafficking in Arms regulations exist in and of themselves. They define the type of information that they're dealing with, which is ITAR technical data. And that's data that by its definition is either listed in the United States munitions list, or it describes hardware or items that are listed there. That being said, the agency that promulgates and administers and enforces the ITAR, which is the Director of Defense Trade Control, a State Department agency, has said that they assume and they deal with ITAR technical data as if it's just another form of CUI. So again, if your orientation is ITAR technical data, you're saying, well, I'm not a defense contractor, or my job is trade compliance, and I'll let the federal contracting people worry about their world. Your world and their world overlap because the rules are going to be the same. And Napoleon, were there any other questions there that I'm not sure that I'm seeing all of?
Yes, in the chat there is another one that says that how can we help with CMMC? Want to take that?
Yeah, I do. And so we address controls that allow us to go to customers and say, if you implement our controls, we can bring you up to an SPRS level of 88 immediately on implementation within your organization. Now, the reason it's not 110 because there's certain controls that can't be dealt with by technology such as ours, which is allows for the storage and management and receipt with technological solutions of CUI. So you can safeguard it, you can receive it properly, you can use it properly, you can keep your folks from violating the rules and so forth. But there's others that require the organization to take certain steps. Now, some of them are fairly straightforward. You have a log for any location where CUI is present. Have a lock on your server room door. If you're using that to store CUI, have your policies in place. The system security plan in place. Have trainings of your folks. Those are requirements that have to be met directly by any organization. We can certainly help. Our technology allows reminders of users. You better be trained. You can enforce it by removing their ability to access CUI if they choose not to get or they neglect getting training. But we can help bring you into a basic level of compliance, but you need to, for the ones that take it to 110, each organization needs to look at them, their own processes, and implement those.
So there is a follow-up question that says that if they understanding correctly, if a company needs to have both CMMC and ITAR compliance, or is it possible to that they only need one of them?
If you comply with our standards, with CMMC standards, you will be complying with the requirements on how to handle ITAR technical data. Now, the context is somewhat different. For example, you will be, if you're a trade compliance person, even though you have a form of CUI called ITAR technical data, you're going to be answering some different questions. Is this a U.S. person to whom it's being sent to at another location? Is there a site license, a site export license, a site agreement with that location for allows us to send ITAR technical data to that location? So the inquiry on how you use the content is different, but the basic controls will be satisfied by satisfying the CMMC. You're supposed to know who you're exporting it to and document the export, and that's specifically what CMMC requires. You know who your user, exclude non-permitted users, know what happened to a file, a document, or a file. You need to know that, for example, in administering under trade compliance, the export of technical data, you need to know where it went to. And so our application in satisfying CMMC will give you the information about when information was sent outside the country, if it's again permitted by a proper export license or an export agreement with a site, and you can report it based upon what you see in our system. It also can prevent information from being sent beyond that site, which is obviously fairly important in meeting ITAR restrictions. So yes, it can, different use case, but then again, on the CMMC and the DoD level, some of the use cases can be supply chain management, or they can be project compliance, and so forth. If you're interested, get in touch with us. We can basically show you a concordance document that shows exactly which of our features and functions meet the NIST 800-171 controls that you have to meet to satisfy the CMMC.
Another question that I have is that they have not seen where CMMC level 2 has a minimum score of 88. Where in the FAR is that shown?
I think I cited it. So if you get actually there is there's a on a website for CMMC maintained by the Department of Defense, there is a PDF that specifically talks about that. So if you send me or us an email at info@RegDOX, I'll send that PDF directly to you or direct you to the site, but it mentions that specifically. You know it's
Another
correct
one
because I
is
always
that
I know it's correct because I always used to say it was 85, and it turns out I was wrong. So we went and looked it up, and it was 88.
another one is that regarding the shared responsibility matrix, if it can be downloaded.
Which one is that?
In
That's
the
this one
chat.
here? Can
I
that be downloaded?
no,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think that will be the or shared responsibility matrix or the concordance document.
oh yeah, no, I think it's actually on the website, isn't it? I think
I
we've
believe
actually,
so.
I think it's on the regdocs.com website, but you don't have to go search around for it. We either send it to you directly or you go to regdocs.com. Artie or Nap,
Yeah.
maybe you could look it up there and just tell us what web page it's on.
Sure, I can share that link.
I think if I'm not mistaken, it is both a concordance with 800.171 controls and then expanded out to 800.172 controls. And again, it's shared in the sense that our approach to CMMC, CUI compliance is to provide an enabling technology. You know, we're not the police officers for an organization. We allow them to implement the controls that they feel are needed and necessary to achieve compliance. And that makes sense because the way our application is structured is we cannot know. It's hidden from us. The encryption of data hides from us what ITAR or other forms of COI, ITAR technical data or other forms of COI that you're dealing with. We can't see it. All we know is a customer has, I don't know, 300 gigabytes of storage, and what is in there we don't know.
That seems to be all of the questions.
Okay, well, I think we've come close to using up the time here, if I'm not mistaken. So I want to thank everybody again for giving us their time to listen to us, and you know, certainly if there's any interest in talking with me further, just if you're interested in going over some of this, we'll send you the PowerPoint. We're glad to talk to any of you. You know, we've learned so much from our customers, both as to their uses of CUI and you know, their needs, and this application we've had has grown over time based on customer demand. You know, most recently we introduced an application which allows a customer to launch it and look for CUI in its network to make sure it's not where it shouldn't be. Or we have another one we introduced about an application 6 months ago, which allows them to deal with their vendors and customers and do a direct drop-off in a secure data room of CUI, so you don't have to worry about it ever touching your enterprise mail servers. And so by listening to customers and their needs, we've found out quite a bit. So always want to talk with you folks.
Thank you very much, William. Can I ask one question, William?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so what would be the assumed cost for this tool, and for, you know, so there, I don't know how CMMC services or tools like this are priced. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, typically it's priced based on two variables that are meaningful to us. One is the number of user licenses you have and the amount of content that is brought on. So we deal with companies that range in size from, I think, the largest, so close to the largest in the world, down to some people that companies that only have, say, 20 people in the company and only 3 or 4 or 5 of them are using CUI. And for the smallest companies, it's really quite straightforward. It's, you know, often under $500, $600 a month to have a fully compliant technology that, you know, their core individuals who are going to receive and deal with CUI have to need in order to meet their obligations. So it can be launched, as we've done it for some companies, for 2,000 or 3,000 users, or for others for 4 or 5 users. And in the latter case, it's really pretty efficient and not really costly.
Thank you very much. And okay, that sounds very good. And I would also, I think there is something else also added in the chat box. Okay, so And for a small business, if they get this service for that cost, would they be able to, I'm trying to put this in layman terms, so would they be able to comply with all the three levels of the CMMC requirement if they like kind of evolve and expand and the requirement become more stricter? Will they be able to use the tool and be compliant with all the other levels?
With controls out of all the levels, as I said, even NIST 800-171, the 110 controls there, which form the basis of level 2 compliance. There's some things you have to do yourself. You have to have, as I said, locks on server room doors. You have to have training in place. You have to have an annual affirmation by a responsible official within the company that controls have been met. But in terms of our technology implementing it and then following using the features and functions that we provide, allow you to get to the point where it's just your own company's policies and procedures that need to be followed, and everything else is done. You don't have to worry, for example, that one of your people are going to open a file drawer and mail out something to somebody who shouldn't receive it, because our technology, if you don't want that to happen, will prevent that from happening.
Thank you very much. Okay, so do you have, Napoleon, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, regarding the 3 levels, certainly it requires more to make it to level 3. So right now we can only provide services up to level 2, and that is based on NIST 800-171. Level 3, certainly that is completely out of the scope.
Oh, yes, yeah, I understand. In the meantime, level 2 will be enough for many of the businesses, small businesses and medium-sized businesses, according to what William said. So 3,000 employees is a max, is a big cap for the number of employees in the controls that you can implement for using the tool. I think that will be great. So thank you very much. Thank you very much from the whole team from RegDOX Solutions. And I would be glad yes, definitely we will send the slides to all of you. But would you please put the website address in the chat box so everyone would be able to access that? I would also put NJIT website in case you are not a client, so you would be able to go register yourself, become a client, and receive no-cost services, while we always have events like this that you can learn from and of course improve your odds on winning government contracts. And definitely cybersecurity is one of the requirements which is going to be implemented very soon for all the levels of the businesses, as long as they are contracting with the federal government, of course. So yes, so there is the link for NJIT, and I can also see that. So once again, thank you very much, William.
Okay, you're welcome.
RT, thank you.
Thank
William,
you.
thank you. And Napoleon, thank you very much for presenting this. And thanks to all our audiences who attended here today with us. We will be presenting more on CMMC. So stay tuned and look at our events calendars on a regular basis so you can further learn about upcoming events and try to register in there. We do have the DCMA event tomorrow, which we also have in-person presence, but the registration is unfortunately closed for the in-person attendance. So while you can try the online event if you haven't already registered for. So thank you very much for joining us for today. Have a very
Thank you,
good
Emma.
day. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Bye.